Hi, this is Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup.
All right, let's go to Georgia. This has got to be the highlight case. This case is fantastic because of its widespread national applicability, not as a binding matter of law, not that the decision of this appeals court is binding, but I love the holding. It's clearly going to be extremely persuasive. So I will talk about it. But so here's the summary for your headline that a Georgia appeals court held that EMS can rely on cancellation by police and therefore would not have a duty to the patient for which they could breach. Interestingly, however, and I'm just going to throw this out because I'm going to revisit it, the issue here, so everybody knows, to prove negligence, right? And that's not even the right way. To prove the unintentional tort of personal injury, you have to prove that a person had a duty to you. Well, that's kind of glossed over here, but I'm going to talk about it, right? Then that there's a breach of duty, that the breach of duty caused the person injury, which is a whole other thing, and that there was an injury. Here, what you're going to see me focused on is the second element, the breach of duty. And in order to prove a breach of duty, right, once you prove what your duty is, then you have to prove that we breached it. And the way you prove one of the many ways you prove a breach is there was a standard, whether that's a standard practice or there's a policy, right, or a protocol that we're required to adhere to, and we failed to adhere to it. Here, the focus is going to be a question: is there a national, which I think is a stupid standard anyway, is there a stupid question? Is there a national standard requiring, and then I'll get into the facts, is there a national standard requiring that the EMS entity, once told they can cancel, should conduct an independent investigation to confirm the reason for their cancellation, right? In other words, police said, hey, there's no patient. Should EMS have to go back up and say, no, maybe we can find that there's a patient, right? So, and here's the facts. Basically, and I'm going to summarize them, there's a 911 call, help, somebody took drugs, whatever, I think they're in danger, and the call goes and hangs up. And again, I'm keeping these facts similar because the pertinent facts to me, right, occur after all this. The police get called, the police dispatcher gets the ambulance dispatcher on the line, which is not uncommon, but when we get to duty, that's where I'm going to say it gets very interesting. So the ambulance company's dispatcher is online with the police. The police are trying to find the house. They couldn't find the house. They finally locate the house from GPS, I assume it's a cell phone because I assume it's a cell phone.
They didn't, the guy who called didn't give an address.
Didn't give an address. So,
right. So
but
they triangulated.
Or today they'd use Rapid SOS and know exactly where it is.
Yeah.
So today, so they get to the house. EMS arrives, police tells EMS, as they always do, which is the true national standard or national practice, let's not call it a standard, is police say, you stage, you wait, we'll investigate. And here they said, we're familiar with the house, we're familiar with the caller, we have some concerns, stay here at the end of the driveway. And EMS does, because you and I just held a session at our conference, which said, who's in charge, police, fire, and EMS. And in this case, it's a scene safety issue to start because the police had concerns. It's a scene safety issue. So EMS stages. We're not in charge of safety. We're in charge of patient care. We don't get a patient until scene is safe. Okay. So now EMS is standing at the driveway. Police go up. For some reason, the police have a knowledge that they were told last time you were here, don't come to the front door because my father who shares a house will get all upset, which I think is crazy. So they go to the back door, they knock on the door, they wait for 5 minutes. This is all on body cam. There's no question of fact as far as I'm concerned.
They know the people's names. They know their names. They call in their names.
Yep. They knew the whole situation. They know a lot of things about them, but the dispatcher is trying to they cannot get them on the phone. In any event, so after 5 minutes or some amount of time, they say patient unfounded or patient not found, and they send the ambulance on their way, right? Tell the ambulance you can go. No patient here to be found. We tried, we can't get in. Mm-hmm. So ultimately what happens, of course, the patient wakes up dead, right? They get another call. Right. They get another call the next day. The person who is the witness to this, and the caller on the first call said, well, my whatever the woman's relationship is to him, she was cold. I thought she was cold because she needed a blanket. Then it turns out she's dead. She'd taken a whole bunch of pills last night, said she went to sleep, and she was so upset when I called 911 the day before that she hung up the phone and wouldn't let me call again, and then passes out and ultimately dies. So the question here is, but remember, the person then died at some point. So the question here is, should EMS have gone up and tried to establish a connection with the patient who the police couldn't find, right? Was there an independent duty? And what they focus on here is not duty. They focused on standard of care. So we'll skip duty for a moment, and the entire, and I think, I know somebody with the same name, but I assume it's not who it is. The expert witness they provided tried to state his opinion that there's a national standard of care, and everybody in EMS knows this is completely untrue. He tried to say there's a national standard of care by which EMS independently investigates police cancellations. And that is legal, to use a Latin phrase, pure crap.
Okay, but let's kind of narrow this, because I've been thinking about this since I wrote it. And in this situation, the police said there is no victim here. We can't find a victim, because that's really important now. Right. Okay. Change the facts a little bit. Change the facts where the police say the victim we found the victim. They don't want transport. You can go in service. I think that's a different situation. Different
issue, because that would be can you take a refuse? Well, and change it one more. Change it one more and say
that's my next note.
Doesn't need medical care.
That's my next one. Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, this is a lot more nuanced. This is where the police are saying, and I think that's what the expert was saying. The expert was kind of dragging in those other scenarios where the police have found someone, and then the person the victim tells the police, we don't want to go. I think there is a duty on the medic's part to evaluate that independently, because you can't refuse without it being a knowing refusal, and the person has to be competent. How can you assess somebody's competence if you haven't evaluated them? So, but again, the scenario here is where you can't find the person. And
okay, so let's take this one, because I want to go back to something you just said. I'm not sure I'm going to agree. This will be fun. This will be a lot of fun. So like I said, this is the showcase case because it's so applicable to everybody. So in this case, right, they said can't find the patient. That's not a competency capacity issue. It's not a do they want care, don't need care, right? And so what the court said is, listen, the expert did not establish that there was any national standard in this instance. So since there was no breach of duty, they didn't violate a standard of care. His testimony should have been excluded, and they then failed to prove that there's a breach of duty, right? I would have attacked, before we get to the other interesting part, I would have attacked this on no duty whatsoever, assuming, and I don't know, that Georgia is a special duty or, state, or however you want to use that phrase, right? Public duty rule. Because let me play this for everyone who's understands special duty. Let me rephrase it, because this is where it gets really interesting. So, and I would have kicked the case out on no duty whatsoever. So in the municipal rules, there is a protection called special duty for municipalities. Now, I don't think that private ambulance company is a municipality. So maybe that's why that's why the police weren't named in the suit. They just went after the ambulance company. Okay, so maybe this is why. So I'll make it a little shorter. But so the ambulance company presumably is non-municipal, except they're performing a municipal service. So they may well get the protection of the special duty rule. And the special duty rule says, listen, no person who receives police, fire, or some cases EMS protection, and there's a lot of cases that say this applies to EMS. By government, Okay, yep. Yeah. If you're providing that service by a government entity, then they're not liable for unintentional acts that happen to you because they have no duty. And to form a special duty, They have to have a one-on-one discussion with you. So the victim and the person who injures you or causes you injury has to have a one-on-one relationship where the victim tells the rescuer, I need something from you. The rescuer says, I'm coming to help. And the victim relies on that rescuer to do what they said they're going to do. Think of it very simply, where somebody's standing on a balcony, say, help, I'm going to jump, I'm going to jump. The fire chief comes and says, no, we're coming for you. Stay there. We're coming. And so they rely on them, say, okay, I'm staying here. And the fire department never goes to get them. So they burn to death, right? That would be a special duty rule. The reason I think this is so interesting on special duty, and there's one nuance, which I'm not going to spend too much time on, but is the seminal issue. There has to be one-on-one contact. So not the victim isn't relying on anyone. In fact, she says she doesn't want to help because she hangs up the phone. So, right. So point one. Point two, it's a bystander, not the victim, who calls 911. 911 is the police dispatcher. And even if you said, well, and you can't here where they're unconscious and they have implied consent, right? There's no implied anything here because the victim says, I don't want help. Maybe that's where it ends. But then the friend is on the phone to the police dispatcher. The police dispatcher is on the phone with the ambulance dispatcher, but the victim's not on the phone with the ambulance dispatcher. There's no relial. So if this was a municipal duty rule, and it could be, because this very well could be the municipal contracted ambulance service, who in many cases does get the benefit, right, when they're municipal contracted specifically, does get the benefit of the special duty rule. They would be out on duty. We would never get to the breach of the duty. But now, ending that, let's go to the great issues you raised. Let's take them one-on-one. So now they're headed, and I want to change this because you raised something really interesting. I don't know if I agree with it or not, but I'm thinking about it. All the time, ambulances are responding to motor vehicle accidents. Right. Two scenarios. Let's see how this plays out, because this has got to be great interest to everybody watching. The police call back, say there is a car accident, or there is a vehicle, but the people were just sleeping in the car. Let's take that one, because this is right. And they cancel, and it turns out, let's say it was a CO poisoning. The police just thought everyone was right. They needed medical care, but the police cut off EMS. EMS doesn't keep going en route because they said, hey, we're canceled en route. We were told not that there was a medical condition, they don't want treatment. We're told they have no medical condition, no accident at all. Would you hear say there's a breach? Would you hear say there's any standard of care or a breach of duty?
Yeah, and let's kind of get to just a straight vehicle accident. Let's not get into CO, but let's just get into a straight vehicle accident. The vehicle accident, you're looking at trauma, and so if the police are saying there's no injuries, I think that's a different scenario. Now, I can tell you here, we would go and get the refusal. We usually do.
That's always my advice to my clients.
But would it be a breach of the duty if we didn't? I don't think so, but that's not a high risk situation. This one was for an overdose. There was an initial report of an overdose. So yeah, you have that, that's in play. And I think that the nuances in the fact pattern, I think, is what makes it. And
that you couldn't find the patient, not that the patient says, I don't need care.
Exactly. Now, let's say we have a vehicle accident and the police get there and say, we can't find a victim. I think I live in a rural area. Okay. And we spend a lot of time checking the woods for ejections after vehicle accidents. It's what we have to do it because, now sometimes somebody gets in an accident, they call a friend and the friend picks them up and they get out of there 2:00 in the morning. We know probably impaired or whatever. But when you're called and the police say that there's nothing, I think at a vehicle accident or the people are not injured, I think that's a slightly different situation than what we have here. If you have a call of a vehicle accident, driver is impaired, and then the police are saying they don't want to go, I think it's a little bit different. And again, all these little nuanced facts.
Well, let me add another nuance. So the point you're making to the viewers, I think, is that, listen, if it's just we can't locate the patient, so there's no medical evaluation that you need to be an EMT for.
Right.
If you can't find a patient, we can trust you can't find the patient. So you can cancel, right? Or there was no car accident, right? It was reported as a car accident. It's a radiator issue, no car accident.
Right. That's another
Right.
classic one. Right.
Right. Doesn't take a medical professional to evaluate the patient or the mechanism of injury. But now what you're saying is when EMS gets, hey, the patient doesn't want care, you can cancel, or there are no injuries to this patient in the accident. Both require an evaluation of the patient, right? Capacity, competence to refuse, and whether they should be advised to go to the hospital. Do they have an injury that the person didn't see or test for, et cetera? So that one now does require, right, an evaluation. So if the police who are non-medical, I'm going to change the circumstance, if the police who are non-medical get on the phone with you and say, patient doesn't want care, you can cancel, what do? Because I have a real issue. So now change it. So look, we're all going to say, oh, of course EMS should proceed, right? Because
classroom answer.
Right, because police, unless they're an EMT, aren't competent. Okay, fine. Now the next question. Are we proceeding with our lights on still? Do we turn the lights off? Mm-hmm. If we get into an accident, do we still have a good faith belief there was an emergency? So let's assume, okay, in the perfect world, we downgrade, but we keep going. Well, by that time, what if they left? What if right now, patient leaving is good for us because, say, they left. But there's all these little things that happen after okay, we're not going to trust the police to cancel us. We're going to go and get our own refusal and do our own evaluation. But here's what I'm saying. I still think there's no duty. I think for the most part, until we've reached that patient, or the patient says, okay, they're coming for me and I'm going to wait for them, there's no duty. So I don't know if there's a liability issue.
The special duty that would clearly be one thing that creates that duty. And I just put one, I think it was in Alabama. I think it was a fire department in Alabama, but it was an ambulance was dispatched. And for whatever reason, it took like 40 minutes to get there. And there was another one out of Indiana that is probably the leading case, very similar fact pattern, where it took like 40 minutes for the ambulance to get there. But the people are roughly 5 minutes away from the hospital. So they call for an ambulance and they say, we need an ambulance. Okay, we're dispatching an ambulance. Okay, that doesn't create a special duty. Okay, the people call back a second time and say, hey, it's been 10 minutes. Where's that ambulance? We're only 5 minutes away from the hospital. Oh, they should be there any second. Okay. That may create a special duty, may not. Okay. The third time, now it's 20 minutes into it. They're calling, hey, what's going on? Oh, just be patient. And the case out of Indiana, the dispatcher actually said, go outside on the front porch, listen in the distance, and you'll hear the sirens coming. And they hadn't even left the barn yet.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So those are the types of scenarios that create the special duty, but just the phone call isn't enough to create the special duty. So again, this was a municipal situation. I think you're absolutely right. And maybe in some jurisdictions, when you're performing a public function, you have the benefit of the public duty doctrine. That may kick in here too. Okay. But my big concern with this one is just that we don't want to overstate our ability to rely on the police. Where the police have said there is no victim, patient found, you're probably on solid ground. Where there is a patient and they're saying, oh, the patient's giving us a hard time, or the patient doesn't want to transport, or something of that nature. I don't think you can stretch this holding to protect not at least evaluating the patient, especially given the overdose allegation, or the fact that there was an overdose.
Yeah. And generally I agree, right? So just to summarize in one simple line is EMS should not usually rely on police that there's no medical or trauma condition, right? It's very different than saying we can't locate.
The condition doesn't warrant treatment.